everyone, and welcome into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata, alongside my partner, Ryan Gregware. Nick Fada will also join us in a few minutes for our first segment. We'll be live with you from 9 to 10:30 on Twitter and YouTube. And Ryan, it's great to be with you tonight as we have a jam-packed show in store for you guys today. NFL playoffs is almost here. Playoff pictures coming into shape now, and that's really my favorite time of year, especially as a Saints fan, making it 4 straight years. I gotta say that. And then college football playoff, less than 48 hours into those 2 games, which should be really fun. NFL hot stove heating up with the Padres of all teams, making some big moves. And then also the NBA back in action, little surprise play from the Knicks as well. So it's definitely a very busy time.
Yeah, this is the most excited I've been to do a show just because there's so much going on in all the sports. You have, obviously, as you said, and the Knicks too. The Knicks are looking good to start the year. We also have, it's week 17 in the NFL, so we have a ton of stuff to talk about there. The college football playoff is Friday. So yeah, I'm super stoked. There's a ton to talk about.
Yeah, and I think we're just going to jump right into it, bring in Nick Fada here to talk about some local football here. I know that especially with our football segment, we're basically going to start out negative and then work our way up to some positive stuff. So we'll start off with the Jets, the most negative, and again, very, very tough situation for the Jets as they have clinched the number 2 overall pick here in the draft. They defeated second straight win, beat the Browns 23-16. Jaguars suffered their 14th loss of the season, so they'll get the number 1 pick, which most likely means Trevor Lawrence as well. Jets still have options. They have Darnold, first-round pick on their roster. Justin Fields there, going to be available for the 2nd pick, most likely. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance should be there as well. So, Ryan, definitely want to get your opinion, as tonight you are a resident Jets fan. So what do you think of the situation?
I mean, yeah, so this has been probably, it's a weird way to put it.
Nick, you got anything? I think Brian's got some technical difficulties. I know you're a Giants fan,
most Jets
and they're
like
looking
season
better.
of all.
Oh, we getting you back, Ryan?
Yeah, we're good here?
Go for it.
I think we're
Yeah,
good.
so what I was saying is it's a weird way to put it, but I think it's the most confusing season, but also most Jets-like season in the history.
Oh.
So Ryan was saying, I think, most confusing season, which, Nick, I think you can agree with on this, because this Jets team, I mean, they start out the year putrid, and then they come out and win the last 2 games, and now they don't have Trevor Lawrence. What's your situation? What do you think of their situation? What do? Do you go with Darnold? Do you draft a QB? What are you thinking?
It is, I mean, the one word I like to describe it as is just laughable almost. I don't know where on earth the Jets were going with this season. As much as tanking is not necessarily appropriate, it should have really been their secret sort of tactic this season, because, they had nothing. It was just a mess. It was totally atrocious out of the Jets this season. I know a lot of people who want Darnold. I know a few people who want Gase, which is crazy to me. But I think, in my opinion, I would like to stick with Darnold. I think the Jets are better than what they have shown this season. Mm-hmm. They're coming off of 2 wins that were relatively impressive games. Very impressive games.
2 playoff wins.
Exactly.
2 playoff teams, rather.
So, and they may be spoiling some of those playoff chances for the Browns,
Rams too.
But I think it could be interesting to see. The Jets have had a lot of problems within the organization, within the team, injuries. With Darnold last season starting, they were 7-6. This year, he's missed time 2 from injury. I think maybe one more try I could give it, especially because the Jets are missing out on Trevor Lawrence. I think that's really, that was their guy, and they blew that in the most Jet-like fashion. So I think you want to kind of see what you got with Darnold. The guy's still young. He's entering his 4th season next year. Mm-hmm. If you can draft with that number 2 pick someone who can come in and make plays right away, then maybe you're talking about some sort of decent, not a playoff, let's not get carried away, but a decent season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start off by saying, you said people who think Adam Gase should still be the coach. I mean, do you know Adam Gase? Because I think he may be the only person right now on the whole universe that think he should still coach for the Jets. And again, maybe that's a reason why Darnold may stay. I mean, whoever comes in here, Darnold's going to be better when Gase is gone. I think we can all agree to that. Darnold has shown the glimpses, but I mean, they were 7-6 last year, but I think that right now it is something that is really interesting when looking at the Jets. I mean, look, I think Darnold has a lot of talent, and I think, Nick, you can agree with that. I mean, he's a guy that's come in here. I mean, I believe he was like the 3rd overall pick, and he's shown it, but the problem is can never put it together. And my thing is with the Jets, I would move away from Darnold almost because of the situation as, look, that was the old regime. It did not work out. Let's start new. And the guy I would go with is Zach Wilson. I love Zach Wilson. I think he's a guy that amazing arm talent, kind of reminds me a little of Justin Herbert, a little bit of Patrick Mahomes, the way he's able to just sling it around the field. He did it with BYU. I know he didn't play that good in the Coastal Carolina game, which was like the only big game he's played in. But I think he just has a ton of potential. And right now, Justin Fields, I don't know. I feel like if he went to the Jets, it would be kind of a bust. Ryan, are we getting back with you? Are you good with, do we have you?
So, yeah, I apologize for the internet issues, but I think I'm good now. You guys can hear me?
Yeah, all good. And look, I feel like that's kind of like the epitome of this Jets season. Right about, we have our Jets fan ready to give his opinion, and then the Wi-Fi comes out. That's like the biggest Jets thing here of 2020 here. But again, what are you thinking? If everything's all good, hopefully we're good. Finally get our Jets fan opinion.
Yeah, so what I've been trying to say is that this is the most confusing and frustrating season in that, you start out with high expectations for Sam Darnold. We knew what Adam Gase was going into this year, but there were thoughts that maybe we could prevail and, not necessarily make the playoffs, but just be competitive. And you start the season getting blown out every game. And then you get the 0-16 in the back of your mind. And we were willing to look past it, as at least I'll speak for most Jets fans here, look past it if it meant getting the first pick and Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, things have changed because they decided to get hot week 15 and 16 and beat 2 playoff teams in the most stunning fashion ever. You go to Los Angeles, you beat a playoff team in the Rams, and then you beat the Browns the next week. So Trevor Lawrence is out of the picture. But I still think at the end of the day, you have to move on from Sam Darnold. It hurts for me to say this because I was a big fan of his. And before this year, he'd shown a lot of promise. He didn't really put it together game by game, but he made throws, he made plays that gave you confidence. But this year has been a different story. He hasn't had a passer rating in the 100s. He hasn't had a 300-yard game. And for as much as we want to say it's all on Adam Gase, you had Joe Flacco take over this team and, match his total season output in a few games. So you have to move on from Sam. And you were just talking about Zach Wilson, who I love. He was a 3-star recruit who came out of nowhere and really just balled out at BYU this year. And in contrast, you have Justin Fields, who is one of the top 10 highest rated recruits ever. So it's a really interesting decision. Right now I'm leaning towards Zach Wilson just because I'm not really sold on Fields as a passer 100%. We just saw against Northwestern, he couldn't throw the ball. He completed 44% of his passes and they needed the running game to bail him out. Zach Wilson, he probably is a little bit more raw, but he has, if he gets the mechanics in check, he has as much potential as anyone in this class.
That's what scares me, though, with Zach Wilson going to the Jets, because I don't know if they can, I don't know who's going to come in and coach this team. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because I think he is really raw. But I think a lot of people said the whole thing on Pat Mahomes, why he didn't go number 1, is because he was really raw. And he sat behind Andy Reid and Alex Smith for a year. And then they were able to really, obviously, he's completely became this mega superstar because of the arm talent and everything. And I think Zach Wilson probably won't be Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there's only one Patrick Mahomes, but I think he can be somewhat like that, a gunslinger that can just hone it in, make some plays. And that's why it depends who they get coaching. And I don't know if I trust the Jets to get the right coach, which I think is a problem when looking at that. But if they get the right coach, I think that, look, I'm a big fan of Zach Wilson. And I think that when you look 5 years down the line, you may say him and Trevor Lawrence may not be that different, especially when, let's face it, Jacksonville, they're no stud franchise. And are they known for, churning out QBs down there with Blake Bortles and Byron Leftwich? I mean, it's not like they're known for, this great QB, machine that they put out. So I don't know. It's definitely an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add to, you said you don't know if you trust them to get the right coach. Joe Douglas has inspired some confidence in Jets fans. You have to remember, he's not the guy who hired Adam Gase.
Exactly.
That was Mike McCaggan, who shortly lost the power struggle to Adam Gase. And so Joe Douglas, he had a really good class. Mekhi Becton has been one of the lone bright spots for this team. And so, I'm at least speaking for myself, I trust him to make the right decision. Gase is obviously as good as gone right now. We just got to wait until this Week 17 game versus the Patriots is played. But yeah, it all depends on really who you bring in because coaching matters so much in this league. I mean, if you remember Josh Allen, he has a lot of the same tools as Zach Wilson and another guy like Trey Lance, who might be in the discussion. But with good coaching, he's been able to blow up and is now one of the best quarterbacks in football. So yeah, obviously it depends on who the coach brings in, who they bring in as a head coach. But I do trust Joe Douglas to make the right decision in that regard, whoever it is.
Yeah, and I would exactly what you said with the coaching. Coaching means, I think, more than so many people realize. If you compare the two New York teams this season, the records are not crazy far apart. But one thing that you can kind of see with the Giants, and maybe a little biased in me saying, but the games are just played almost with so much more heart and passion. And it's
There's no
because
bias
the
there.
Giants are behind their guy in Joe Judge. And I remember one game I was laughing. I was like, "What? This happened?" Joe Judge lost a bet to Evan Ingram on the Ole Miss game. He had to go to the post game conference in Ole Miss gear, and it was like you didn't see any of the prior New York Giant coaches do that, and you never seen Adam Gase do it. You don't really hear a lot of Jets players talk highly on Gase, and a lot of times when you look at the guy on the sidelines, he doesn't look crazy engaged, fired up while coaching the team. So it's really about the culture coaching for me. I mean, you could be a rookie coach and not know exactly everything you're doing yet. Of course, it's a learning process, but if you have the right mindset and culture that you're trying to put onto your guys as a squad, the outcome is the potential really is so much more. The potential is just greater. It's that simple.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And I was talking to you guys before the show, and I think that when you look at all these first round talents and quarterbacks, it almost matters more about where they're going to matter about their talent, who can develop. And that's something that I think is really important because, again, I think that's going to matter who the Jets put into place. And I think that is almost just as important, especially because you're not getting Trevor Lawrence. It's almost as, who you're going to put into the quarterback is almost as important as who's going to be your play caller, who's going to be able to develop your quarterback. I think that's just as important, if not more important. And those two guys, whoever they end up being, they're going to have the keys to this franchise and try to bring them a little closer because there is some talent on this team, just like there is some talent on this Giants team. And it seems like at least they got the right coach to, bring it forward, move it forward. And now you see that they're kind of on the doorstep of a playoff appearance, and at least they're playing a meaningful game in week 17. And that's where I want to go next. So it's a perfect transition here talking about this Giants team because they're going to play the Cowboys in MetLife on Sunday, and it's a meaningful game for them. And, my big thing is if you would have told Giants fans back in September that you were playing a meaningful game, week 17, I think they'd all be thrilled.
I wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I'm so shocked. And the one thing that I think so many people have forgotten, certainly myself, is the best player on our football team in New York, arguably the best football player in New York, has been hurt all season in Saquon Barkley. So when that guy comes back, and if you get a healthy Daniel Jones for a season, complete season, we lost a few, the Giants lost a few clutch games that were needed to win, like the Cardinals game. That Ravens game was tough. I never really thought there was a chance, but you win even one of those games, and you almost have the division locked up. But the tougher part is, I've never thought I would ever say this, but let's go Eagles, because if the Eagles don't win, Washington's in. So it's going to be a crazy week 17. The NFC East, of course, highlighting it, but so much other action going on around the league too. It's just such an exciting time.
Yeah, if you were to tell Giants fans that after week 5 you were 0-5, you're going to be competing for a playoff spot in week 17, you'd be like, "What are you saying?" The turnaround, I think, the turnaround just speaks to the job that Joe Judge has done. He kept the locker room in check. We talked about how important coaching is, and he's able to get the guys to play hard for him. And in this division, with how bad it's been, playing hard has pretty much got the Giants where it is. Obviously they have talent on both sides of the ball, but it's not playoff talent. And to be in this situation where a win and an Eagles win, as you said, let's go Eagles. If you're a Giants fan, to make the playoffs, host a playoff game, that's really all you can ask for. And, while it could be 6-10, maybe you're 5-11, you don't make it, I still think there is optimism towards the future. We can talk about whether we think Daniel Jones is the guy, which I think is a really interesting discussion in its own self. But to be this competitive in these games is just a testament to the coaching and the job they've been able to kind of do, flipping it around.
Yeah, for me, there were a lot of games earlier in the season where they were possession away, a few throws away. That Bucks game really stands out to me, where the Bucks, a lot of people are talking them as they're going to make some noise in the NFC. And, you have the Giants basically taking them to the wire, which I thought was really interesting. And if they would win, the Giants win and the Eagles win, it seems like that would be a matchup in the playoffs, which would, I think, be really interesting. And kind of talking about that Eagles game, the Giants obviously need the Eagles to win. Obviously, they're playing Washington, and we'll see who's going to be the quarterback for Washington right now, because the whole thing with Dwayne Haskins, he was released after an incident where he's videotaped at a club maskless and all the things with him. And they finally just cut ties with him. And now if Alex Smith can't go, he didn't practice today, Taylor Heineke starting that game, which, again, it's almost advantage Eagles. If the Eagles come in to play this game and they're ready to go and they want to play spoiler, I think they may have a good chance to win it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because they aren't playing for anything, really. I mean, they're eliminated, but you love to spoil another team's season, which is exactly what they're going to get the chance to do. And, we don't know who Taylor Heineke is. He did look good, though, in mop-up duty for the football team against the Panthers. He made a nice throw to J.D. McKissick for a touchdown. And I think it's, the Giants really have a shot here. This isn't the Chiefs playing the Jaguars to get him in. This is the Eagles can totally win this game versus the football team after how terrible they look versus Carolina. And so there definitely is optimism, and there definitely is a very realistic shot they do drop that game.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like right now with the Giants, I think it may be more important for them if they're going to get the win. I think that may be the more questionable move. And I feel like they're playing a Cowboys team that looks pretty good. But I mean, Nick, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like every time the Cowboys win a few games this season, it's like, oh, we're ready. We them boys. And how about them Cowboys? And then the next week they fall flat on their face.
I don't want to hear any of that we them boys stuff. I mean, it's listen, sure, they got Dak got hurt, of course. They could have been much, much better, but I still don't think this division would have been theirs this year if Dak were to be healthy, because they have just looked sloppy in so many games, like you said. So I am actually very excited. I'm happy. The Cowboys are my least favorite team in the NFL. So I'm so happy that when this Week 17 games comes, that the Giants beating them means they're done. And then, of course, we still have to wait to see if we get in the playoffs. But, it'll be very – I'm almost like jittery. I'm so anxious to just get to Sunday and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun. I mean, I feel like the NFC East is the only division really to always finish on the last game of the season. It always does, I feel.
Always chaos.
Yeah, it's always that Sunday night football game to get them in, and that should definitely be two really interesting matchups. And again, having a team under 500 to make it will be definitely something to talk about as we move into the playoff picture. And that's what we'll be talking about next. We'll look at the NFC, AFC playoff pictures. But first, we are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more One-on-One Nightly. Welcome back into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Ryan Gregware, and And Ryan, we're going to get into some playoff picture talk here. It's going right into the AFC, as I think this is a really interesting conference to talk about, because obviously you have the Chiefs at the top, and then I think the Bills, definitely another team that's starting to rise, and I think a lot of people are starting to get on their bandwagon. And then you have a lot of like above average teams that really haven't showed out fully, but they've showed a lot of potential. And again, there's a possibility to have like 3 11-5 teams in this thing. And then obviously you could have 1 11-5 team miss the playoffs, which is something that, again, is really tough, especially after you expand the playoffs. You would think none of the 11-5 teams would ever miss the playoffs. And here we are. So what team do you feel like would be the most likely to get left out? I mean, right now I'm thinking it looks like it may be the Browns, but I think they may have their saving grace because Big Ben's not playing, and the Steelers look like they're about to just sit their starters. The Dolphins, I think, are another team. But it'll be interesting to see if Buffalo sits their starters because, I mean, basically them and the Steelers are in very similar situations. So, again, I think it's going into Sunday, I think it's a lot to talk about. And I think a lot of moving parts still because you don't know who will play their starters, who won't. So I think that's kind of almost as big as a story as looking at these games.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, how you brought up how we're going to have a 10-win or 11-win team not make the playoffs when we expanded 7. And I remember there were a lot of people who were criticizing it. And obviously, if you look at the NFC, you're going to have an under 500 team and a 9 or 8-win team in there. But to see a 10 or 11-win team not in there is pretty remarkable. And going on who is going to miss out, I think it just comes down to strictly the opponents that these teams play. So you mentioned you think the Browns, but with Big Ben out, I think that absolutely flips it. Big Ben has been a Browns killer throughout his career, but Mason Rudolph, for all of Big Ben's struggles this year, is not the same talent. That should be a game. I think the Browns are favored by 9 right now. Obviously they just lost to the Jets, which is a game that everyone thought they should win, but they should win this game versus the Steelers. They have to win this game versus the Steelers. They control their own destiny. If they win this game, they're in no matter what. They don't have to worry about other stuff. And then I turn it to the other side. I say, who is going to lose? Now the Colts play the Jags, and the Jags beat them week 1. And this Jags team's 1-14. Do I think they are going to get both wins against the Colts? No, I don't. I think they're going to go 1-15, and this year is going to be over for them. They've packed it in. So if the Colts beat the Jags, they'll be fine. And then the Baltimore Ravens, they play the Bengals. We assume they should win that game for how they've been looking. And then it comes down to the Dolphins, and it's really just the luck of the draw because they have the toughest matchup by far. They play the Bills, and it is important. You talked about we don't know who's playing their starters. Sean McDermott said today there's no plan yet, to bench anyone or to play anyone. It's still up in limbo. And it's crazy. The Dolphins season could come down to the Bills management deciding what to do because the Bills look unstoppable right now. We'll talk about them in a second and their Super Bowl chances. But if the Dolphins have to go up against a full Bills team, I don't love their chances based on how Buffalo has been playing. And that would make the Dolphins at 10-6 the odd man out for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now if Buffalo plays their starters, the Dolphins probably will be that team, which, for me is a little sad. My brother's a huge Dolphins fan, so I know he definitely won't want to hear that. But I mean, I would be uncomfortable with because Tua is going to start this game. I would be uncomfortable getting him in a shootout with Josh Allen. And I know that this Dolphins defense is really good, but they're just hitting on all cylinders. And I'd be surprised if they kept them under 28 points, 30 points. And even if Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in again and he has this amazing, Fitzmagic moments, I don't think it's good enough to beat Josh Allen. Maybe it's good enough to beat the Raiders, who just have a pitiful defense. And again, Derek Carr, wouldn't call him, Josh Allen right now. It just stinks, but they look like they'll be the odd team out. And then again, you would have the Ravens, Browns, Colts. And then it's like, who out of those 3 teams is most likely to make a run at it? And then I really look to Baltimore as they're a team. I think they've played in the playoffs now a few times, and it's almost like Lamar Jackson's knocking at the door to now finally get over that hump and get a playoff win. I think they're playing the best football out of the 3 teams that would make it as of now. We'll see what matchup they get, but I think if they got like the Steelers, I think that's a perfect matchup for them. They got bad blood already, and I think they can win that game. That's the one team out of those groups of 3, Colts, Browns, Ravens, that I would really like to see, and I think that they have a chance to make some noise here.
Yeah, the Ravens, I feel like every year we have a team where it's like, oh, that's the team you don't want to see. A team that maybe doesn't have the best record, but they're coming in red hot. And that's the Ravens this year. Assuming they beat the Bengals, they'll come in with 5 straight wins to get them into the playoffs when they needed to win out to make it. And now they're in the driver's seat. And as of right now, you talked about matchups. They would play the Buffalo Bills. And I think that would be a sneaky upset here because the way that the Ravens play football could expose the Bills a little bit. The Ravens, the last 4 games during their win streak, they have averaged over 220 yards rushing a game. And it's also important to note the Bills give up the most rushing yards per game out of every playoff team at 122 or something like that. So this is a really good matchup for the Ravens. If they're able to run the football all over the Bills, this could be an upset here. But going back on just the picture as a whole, yes, I see the Ravens as a scary team. And the thing with the Dolphins now making it is I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it because right now with Tua, they can really only win one way. Tua is a game manager at this point. We'll see what his career turns into. But they need low-scoring games, defense, no turnovers, kill the clock, and kind of chipping away here. If Fitzpatrick's starting, I will be rooting for the Dolphins to make the playoffs over anything because Fitzmagic in the playoffs, we've never seen it before. It would be a sight to see, and it would be just a wacky kind of fun little thing. But, yeah, it does look like the Dolphins will miss it right now. The Ravens, just like you said, are my pick to kind of be one of these sleeper teams that can kind of make some real noise, maybe shock someone. Last year we saw the Vikings shock your Saints. We saw the Titans shock the Ravens. And if that's going to happen this year, I see the Ravens being the team to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and you were talking about who's the team coming into the playoffs, like out of the wild card games. The Saints were that team last year. I feel like they were the team. Everyone thought that they were going to, from the wild card round, go to the Super Bowl. Didn't work out, and that completely flopped. And again, I feel like when looking at these teams, it is. I think that these teams are one of the better 3 wild card teams that we've seen in a while. And I think the Colts are another team, just a team that runs the ball really well. And those teams do good in the playoffs. And as you said, the Buffalo, I want to see them because can they run the football? Can they just do stuff on defense as well? Can they win in the trenches? I think that's really important because, I mean, look, Baltimore, they're going to try to punch you in the mouth. And it's if you can punch back. And I do think that's going to be really important. And I do want to jump over to the Bills because they're coming off of a dominating win against the Patriots, 38-9. Josh Allen slinging it, looks great. And they look like a team that could maybe go up against the Chiefs. And I do think the Chiefs are another team. They've played 7 straight one-score games, and they've won all of them. And when you get into one-score games, and now you've won 7 in a row, when's the time where you lose it? And for the Chiefs, it would come in the playoffs. And I think they will play more close games. And maybe it's not the Bills. Maybe it's some other team. Maybe it's like a Ravens team that can punch you in the mouth. How are you looking at the Chiefs coming into this one? Is it the Bills, another team? Who can challenge them?
It's fascinating to me because I feel like everyone's trying to pick apart the Chiefs and find ways that we can discredit them. The 7, obviously it's meaningful, right? They've won 7 straight by 1 score. But let's also keep in mind, they've lost 1 game since week 10 of 2019. I mean, this Chiefs team is a wagon. They just win games. And so the 1 score stuff, I think it's a little weird. But I also think you can point to that being just the motivation might not be there for the Chiefs. What are these games really like? Their sights are on the Super Bowl again. And they're still winning these games, right? It's not like they're falling to the Falcons, who they barely beat. It's not like they're losing these games. They're still finding ways to win. Maybe not as glamorous as we like to have seen them win. But the other thing I'll say with the Chiefs is, do I see someone beating them? And, it might be boring to say this. I want to say the Bills or the Ravens. I just talked up the Ravens. I just can't see anyone stopping the Chiefs. And the way to beat the Chiefs is actually in shootouts because throughout Pat Mahomes' career, he has 8 losses. Only one of them was when the team didn't score 25 plus. So you have to keep it. You have to outscore them. You're not going to be able to get enough stops to just win like that. You need to match them on offense. Now, what we have seen from Josh Allen is really, really fascinating because he's playing almost up to Mahomes' level, dare I say. And so if he can keep that up, if they can survive the Ravens, who I think, I just said I think they're going to beat them. But if the matchups are different here, the Bills, they could totally beat them if Josh Allen, plays outstanding and everything goes right. But if you need everything to go right to knock off this Chiefs team, that's probably not a good way to go into the game. And that's just the reality of the situation. I don't see anyone taking down the Chiefs as of right now, barring anything shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And as I said, the last time I was on one-on-one, it was Saints Chiefs. And I was like, I mean, I'm the biggest Saints fan ever. You would even think that if there was a game I was going to pick against Patrick Mahomes, I mean, that would be the one. And I didn't. You don't bet against Patrick Mahomes. You just don't do it. The way you beat the Chiefs is by time of possession, and because they're going to score them. As you said, they're going to score. They're going to probably get to 30, but it's can you score it also just as quickly, and can you get to that 30? I think the 30, getting over 30 is the biggest one with the Chiefs, is if you can win 35-31, those are the types of games that you're going to win. And I feel like when you move over to the NFC, there are a few teams that can do that. When you look at what Green Bay is doing, what the Saints are doing, even though they did lose by 3, I think that's also something that, those two teams, obviously you have Russell Wilson too, who we all know is dangerous. If he gets a shot, I think the NFC, it's not as much as the teams who's going to get in, because we basically know that. It's going to be maybe the Bears, maybe the Cardinals. But I mean, that's kind of, I think the bigger conversation here is who is the kings of the NFC, and, Packers, Saints, Seahawks, which one's the best?
Right. And right now I have to lean Packers just on the fact that they're going to get the bye. I mean, you look at the past Super Bowl, obviously, you can never count Tom Brady and the Bucks out, but they're going to have to win 3 road games to get there. I know the fan stuff, you can talk about how this year will be the year. We see that, but I just don't think that's that likely. And am I going to pick Aaron Rodgers to win 2 games at Lambeau over someone else to win 3, including 1 at Lambeau? Yeah, I'm going to do that. The Packers right now, Rodgers is also way better than he was last year. That's important to note because they went 13-3 last year and got to the NFC Championship game, and Rodgers is way better. Like, he has 18 more passing touchdowns than last year. He's probably the MVP right now, him or Mahomes. I think with Mahomes sitting, it'll be Rodgers. But anyway, do I see anyone knocking them down? Your Saints, I think we talked about this the other day. I just can't see Drew Brees winning at Lambeau on the road in the cold outside. I'm sure you could tell me why I'm wrong in a second, but the Seahawks are the one team I think is a little interesting just because their defense is trending in the right direction. They lead the league in sacks since week 9, which is when Carlos Dunlap got traded to them. It's when Jamal Adams returned from injury. So they are getting after the quarterback after their dreadful start to the year. And they're also number 2 in pass defense since week 12 as well. And we just saw them hold the Rams to 9 points. So the way their defense is playing and the way Russell Wilson can throw the ball, and they're able to keep every game, I feel like, close, weird, ugly. Could they force the Packers, the Saints to do that? I think they could. But right now, I wouldn't bet against Rodgers. 2 games at Lambeau Field, it's just too easy for me not to pick that.
Yeah, and I do think that right now the Packers are the favorites, and I think a lot of people are going to call them the favorites. I think that the Saints definitely could beat them in Lambeau. I think that's something a lot of people don't like to talk about, and that's why I'm going to take the Saints team to do that. And I think a lot of people don't think Brees is playing good right now, and a lot of people forget. And I really have been watching, ESPN or whatever. I feel like a lot of people are forgetting that the offensive player of the year from 2019 is not playing for the Saints right now, and he will be for the playoffs. And that's Michael Thomas. And he helps the Saints. I was just talking about time of possession, beating the Chiefs. And that's kind of similar with Aaron Rodgers too. You got to be able to keep him off the field. And Michael Thomas helps the Saints a ton with that. Like, he's a guy that's going to, convert first downs. I know a lot of people like to call him, the slant boy or whatever, but he converts first downs. He's going to come up in big situations. And then you add it with Alvin Kamara, who just scored 6 touchdowns. He looks at the best that he's looked all season. And Drew Brees, the one thing I do want to say, people say that he's not fully recovered off of that ribs injury. This game, he completed and attempted more passes, 15 to 20 yards, than he did 10 yards or less. So he's still moving it down the field, and slowly but surely, but he is doing it. Add Michael Thomas to the mix, add all-pro punt returner Deontay Harris to that mix as well. I don't know, I'm really liking how the Saints team's looking right now. And again, we don't know how the seeding's exactly going to work out, but it's looking like the Packers will get that number 1 seed. I mean, to me, it's just really interesting. Also, the Seahawks, what you're saying, I mean, to me, you never bet against Russell Wilson. I mean, he's a guy that I think people forget about almost. I mean, he's a guy that I'm actually scared about, because if it was 2-3 for the Saints, I think that you would have then a 2-3 matchup between the Saints and the Seahawks, and I'd be scared to play Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and it should be noted, too, the reason that the Packers don't have the number 1 seed locked up is because if they lose to the Bears and the Seahawks win, they jump them. They jump the Saints, too, because the Saints did lose to the Packers. So if the Seahawks are the 1 seed, it's a whole different story because, as I said, I love the fact that Aaron Rodgers would only have to play 2 home games to get to the Super Bowl. And the one thing I will say about the Saints, obviously you just made a great case. Drew Brees, his arm has been getting questioned, but as you said, it looks like it's looking better. Maybe the rest with the injury helped him come back because he's maybe stronger. There's been a weird dynamic the last few years. You can talk about the refs in 2018 all you want. They still should have won that game. They got the ball first in overtime. That game was misrefed everywhere. You had missed face masks go against the Rams. And in 2019, last year, they were my Super Bowl team, the Saints. I love what they were doing going in. You're playing at the Dome. I expect you to win every time in the playoffs. And they dropped one to Kirk Cousins. Yeah, it was a shocker. So there is just a weird dynamic of them, recently not living up to these big games. Obviously, the year before, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you had the Minneapolis Miracle, which I won't necessarily fault them for that. But there's a weird persona going on, and it's just like, do I want to go to the well again? Do I want to pick the Saints again? Because I picked them last year and the year before. I really want Brees to get 2 before he's gone. Obviously, you do as well, being the Saints fan. But, Aaron, as I keep repeating this, Aaron Rodgers, 2 games in Lambeau, it's simple enough for me.
Yeah, and then just to kind of outline that the number 1 seeding, how it works, if the Packers win, they get it. And if they lose, that opens up some weird things. Actually, if the Saints would win and the Seahawks win, the Saints would get it because of conference record. And then if the Saints lose, if all 2 lose and the Seahawks win, the Seahawks get it. So a lot of weird things could happen if the Packers lose to the Bears. Now, I'm not betting with Mitchell Trubisky against the Packers, but if that game happens, I think then you get some crazy stuff. And the one last thing in the Saints, you say that they've had, playoff loss after playoff loss, which they've had in 3 straight years. You had crushing losses. Kind of reminds me of the Dodgers a little bit. We're a team that keep on knocking on the door. You think Kershaw can't pitch in the postseason, they're cursed, whatever, and then they finally do it. Nashville's kind of a similar thing. So I will leave us with that. That will wrap up our NFL talk for the night. On the other side of this short break, we'll get into some college footballs. We got both semifinal games on Friday. Those should definitely be fun. We'll be right back. Into One-on-One Nightly. I'm your host, Andrew Bellotta, alongside Ryan Guegware. Nick Fado will also join us in our next segment where we break down the MLB hot stove. But Ryan, let's jump into these college football matchups here, as I think these are interesting for different reasons. And I want to start off with Alabama, Notre Dame here, 4:00 game. It's the first game here. Bama is favored by 19.5 points, which for a playoff game, I think is pretty insane. I mean, this game to me, when you look at it, I think it's huge for college football, especially the playoff era, because if they go out and get blown out, I think you see major changes. I mean, I think that's just, what I'm thinking with this one. And again, I think that it happens because to me, Notre Dame, they just got blown out against Clemson. Bama's better than Clemson in my mind. I mean, their offense is just such a juggernaut. Najee Harris, you have Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Mac Jones. He's great at that system. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be a great QB on the next level, but he's good at running that system. And right now, I don't trust Brian Kelly and what they're doing, and I feel like this could get ugly.
Yeah, I want to start with saying, as a big college football fan like myself, it's never a good sign when going into this Rose Bowl, I'm trying to find and manufacture that Notre Dame can keep this close. Like, it's just such a mismatch from a talent perspective and how they play their styles of game. Bama is the most explosive offense in college football. They average 49 points a game. They're number 2 in points per and yards per play. And Notre Dame is not that offense. Ian Book good this year, but he is more on the game manager side in the sense where, if you get in shootout after shootout, he's not going to deliver. I know he delivered earlier in the season. I know Clemson had some guys out with COVID. That's a different story. We saw versus Clemson the second time in the ACC championship game, Ian Book and that offense really struggled, and they cannot play that way again. And even if they play 10 times better, they're still going to lose this game because they will not be able to stop Bama. Like, they just won't be able to. I think I was talking about this earlier with someone, like maybe one stop in the first half they get when Bama's really going for it, just how explosive they are. And, Notre Dame, what they do well is they run the football well. So I guess the only way you can, I'll spin this positive for them. The only way that they have a shot is that if they run the football, they kill the clock, they dominate time of possession, they get lucky with a few Mac Jones turnovers, and they maybe limit the big plays, which is extremely hard to do. They need to play perfect football to even make this a close game. And even then I wouldn't pick them. And so, yeah, I hate to just harp on them because, as you said, this is a big game for college football, right? Last year in the 1-4 game, we saw LSU blow the doors off Oklahoma. And the way that, the people have been asking for an 18 playoff. And, one of the common rebuttals is, who wants to see Cincinnati get blown out, versus Alabama? Well, we're watching blowouts anyway. And so why not get new teams into the mix? And one more thing I'll say about the spread, you talked about 19.5. It is the largest ever for a college football playoff game, which is really discouraging and not a great sign for the sport. But obviously, it's still the playoffs. Notre Dame is still a really good team. So, we see what happens here. Maybe they can keep this close. They get a few turnovers. Ian Book plays the best game of his career. But even then, it's still going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of sum up this game, I mean, ESPN's FPI match predictor, which just takes in basically the whole team and it just gives its prediction based on analytics and stuff. Bama has an 81.1% chance to win. And this is a playoff game. Yeah, and it's too low, I think, as it is. This is a playoff game. And to me, I think we could both agree that Notre Dame's outclassed. And in a playoff game, when it's only 4 teams in that playoff, it shouldn't happen year after year. This would be the second straight year where you're getting a 1 seed that is just on another level than your 4 seed. And again, that's something that I don't even know if you change it by adding 8 teams or 16 teams. Maybe you just blow up the whole thing and try to change it again. Because I think a problem with college football is also New Year's Six Bowls don't, have that much weight on it, which is a problem in my opinion. And I don't know if it's also recruiting because all these guys, if they're only going to Clemson and, Alabama and Ohio State, you're going to have the same 3 great teams forever. And that's something that to me is a problem in this game. It's, maybe that Notre Dame comes out there and they keep it close. Cause I think that when you look around college football, I bet everyone's hoping and praying for that to happen, because if it doesn't, I think that this is definitely changing, because I think that it's going to be similar to the BCS championship before it all switched, and it was Alabama, Notre Dame. So similar parallels there. And Alabama just completely ransacked that Notre Dame team. And I don't know, I think this is, probably a bigger game in just the stretch of just college football as a whole, as I think it's really going to ignite some change here into, this whole system, because to me right now, it's just broken.
And going off something that Brian Kelly said, this is on Notre Dame's side. This something that upset me earlier in the week. He said that Notre Dame has nothing to prove in this game. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, because if you look at what Notre Dame has done, they have, am I still here? Am I good? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So Notre Dame, every year the knock on them is the same. Can't win the big game. They can get to the big game, but they can't win it. And this year you could argue in the year, right? They shock Clemson at home. And then later in the year, they get blown out by Clemson. So to say you have nothing to prove when you've previously said that this you believe is your best team ever is very discouraging, and it doesn't trend well for Notre Dame. And it probably does highlight some of the holes in college football, how you have the same 2 teams at the top every year, same 3 teams. And and it's just it's an issue overall for the sport right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think maybe goes to recruiting, because, I mean, maybe, if you put an 8-team playoff in, maybe high schoolers are going to Cincinnati and be like, okay, now I could actually play on that stage. I could play for, a championship, or at least have a shot to play for a championship. And maybe that's how you create more parity, because I feel like right now it's less and less competitive between, the 10th ranked team and the first ranked team, and maybe it's 8, maybe it's 16, and I think that's something they have to look into, because 4 is just not enough. Because if you're a top prospect, you're thinking, okay, these are the 4 teams that make it every year, and I'm going to go to one of these teams because I want to build my image, build my brand, and try to obviously move to the NFL. And to me, probably if you're a prospect, maybe outside of Oklahoma, because they're so good at just building talent and quarterback talent specifically, I think they're a team that, definitely quarterback prospects would be apt to go to. But besides that, I mean, I want to play for Bama because I want to play for a national championship. And I don't know, that's something that I feel like it's going to be interesting, because this is the game. Because if this game goes out of control, I think it's going to force college football's hand to kind of change things up. And I feel like this other game here, Clemson, Ohio State, the primetime game, to me, it's the better game. You have two of the top prospects here. You got Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields coming off of a pretty, I would say, mediocre game, in the Big Ten championship. I mean, this game's a little more closer. It's Clemson 7.5-point favorites. And I think that looking at this game, the biggest storyline has to be Justin Fields, because if he goes back-to-back bad games, I see his draft stock just plummeting.
Yeah, I mean, as a Jets fan with the number 2 pick, Justin Fields is someone we talked about earlier who's in contention. And this is a monster game for him. Obviously, the draft stock is he's kind of getting jumped by Zach Wilson a little bit. And that game he just played versus Northwestern is unacceptable in this environment. You cannot show up against Clemson, score 20 points, throw 2 interceptions, complete 44% of your passes. And, Trey Sermon, the running back, was a saving grace for them. He rushed for 331 yards, 2 touchdowns. In the second half, they couldn't throw the football, and they just ran at them every play, and Northwestern couldn't stop them. But against Clemson, Trey Sermon is not going to run for 331 yards, right? Clemson is one of the best teams at stopping the run. They only give up 2.8 yards a carry. So you're not going to be able to win unless Justin Fields is the best player on the field, which is another reason why, this is why college football is awesome, because his draft stock, the season, everything comes down to how he plays. Because if he scores 6 points in the first half, if he struggles with Clemson the way he did against Northwestern, not only is his team going to be bounced, not only are they going to be humiliated, his personal stock will plummet. So it's a huge game for him overall. It's an awesome game on the sense of, last year this was one of the best college football games in the playoffs we've seen since they expanded to 4. But it is a different Ohio State team. They don't have J.K. Dobbins this year, who was huge in that game. No Chase Young. Lost some guys in the secondary, and Arnett and Jeff Okudah, which makes me lean heavily towards Clemson because, even if Justin Fields plays his best game, they can get exposed in the secondary. Right now, Ohio State, they were 7th in the Big Ten in pass efficiency. They gave up 491 yards to Indiana, which was a really ugly game for them. I know they won it, but Mike Penix threw it all the way down the field. And so the secondary is a real issue. And Trevor Lawrence, if there's one thing we know about him, he's going to expose your weaknesses. One loss as a college starter, that was in the championship last year. He is going to pick apart that secondary. So you need Justin Fields to play amazing. You need the secondary to ball out more than they're used to. And even then, that's when you even have that's when you have a shot versus Clemson out of the gate. And just like I talked about Notre Dame, you need a lot to go right for Ohio State to win this. This is not the same matchup as last year, and this is not the same Ohio State team.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Ohio State's not battle tested this year. I think that's the main thing. They played 6 games. And to me, I think they're obviously year over year, they've lost a lot of guys to the draft. And they're a team, I think Justin Fields is going to have to carry them. Now, I don't think as big as, they need everything to go right as much as like Notre Dame does. Because, I mean, I do think this will be a closer game. And I do think that Fields is going to bounce back because he knows this is the biggest game of his career to this point. And he's going to obviously have to get it going. And I think for him, it's key because you were talking about how, Trey Sermon's going to have a tough time running. They're going to need him to get going. And he's going to have one of his, probably his signature game of his career. And, he's a guy with, to me, a ton of talent, bounced around, transferred once, I believe, from Oklahoma. So he's a guy that has to come up in here. And I think he's a guy, if you can kind of soften up the boxes with Justin Fields, he makes some throws, then you can run it with Trey Sermon, keep Trevor Lawrence off the field because he's going to score a lot of points. We just know that. Also, Travis Etienne, we know how good he is. He kind of reminds me a little of Alvin Kamara, who, that makes me excited about him because he's a guy that gets it out of the backfield. He breaks tackles. I think he's just really helps that offense a ton, to combine him with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that offense is just crazy. But I think it will be closer than people expected. I mean, maybe Clemson barely covers. I think it's going to be close, but I do think Trevor Lawrence gets this done. And we get a matchup I think everybody wanted between Clemson and Alabama to really, because these are the two teams. Like, I think everyone knew that coming into this year, we got Bama, we got Clemson, and playing these games, it's like, okay, these are the two best teams. Now we want to see them battle it out.
Yeah. One more important thing to note about Ohio State is in that win against Northwestern, they're missing 22 players, including Chris Olave, who has been Justin Fields' number one guy the last 2 years. So that's going to be huge to get him back. You know, Justin Fields, he will play better. He's a spectacular talent at the end of the day. And to play that poorly, I just think he has to bounce back.
Exactly.
But as you said, you know, the way we're trending is another Bama Clemson championship, which is another, you know, it's going to be another classic. Excuse me. It's going to be a shootout. We know that. And just the way that the way Clemson's looked, the way Alabama's looked, it should be a great game if it gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's something that, you know, at least you'll probably have those two teams have a really good final. But even that, I mean, that will be an interesting one. I do think that right now, when looking at, you know, Ohio State, Clemson, I think that you look at these two teams, and I think it does come back to the quarterbacks and the prospects. And I think Justin Fields, we talked about it a lot. But I mean, do you see him jumping over Wilson if he has a huge game? Would you say that he's a guy comes in here and he gets that and he would be picked second overall? And then you as a Jets fan, would you, let's say he goes off and has a huge game, would you feel comfortable picking him?
Right. So I do think he has the potential to pass Zach Wilson because he's been in front of him all year.
Sure.
You know, if you asked me this question last year, I'd say, who's Zach Wilson? Right? So Justin Fields is a guy who's proven it. I know that he struggled recently and some other big games. But would I feel safe with Justin Fields right now? No. Because of what he's doing as a passer, you know, it's a, you know, I'm a criminal of the moment. But just seeing him struggle against Northwestern, I thought of, oh, man, we have to get the first pick. Now that's out of the question, Andrew. So, you know, obviously if he balls out, if he shocks the world and wins a national championship or something like that, I'll feel better about him. But I do think he's still a really good talent. I'm leaning more towards Zach Wilson just because the production was there for a full season as well. But as I said earlier, I'm going to trust Joe Douglas to make the pick, whoever it is. And Justin Fields, though, he does have something to prove. I know he's had a spectacular career, but he does have to prove that he can at least hang, you know, at least keep this competitive. Don't have this being Notre Dame Clemson all over again. You know, you need to put up points in this game. And it's, yeah, at the end of the day, what I want him to right now, no, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but I'm looking for him to play better. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like looking into this game, just as someone who likes the NFL better, love college football, but for me, like college football better, or like the NFL better, I'm sorry. And looking at these, when looking at this game, I'm just like, I want to see what Justin Fields could do because I watched him in that Northwestern game, like, oh, like, I mean, this is the guy everyone was, you know, hyping up. But, you know, I think right now, I think his stock is almost, I think, especially when you're looking at national media, everyone's going to be on this one. It's almost, you know, it's huge. This game's really big for him. And I think that's why they're going to keep it close. And I think that may also, like, because if both these games are blowouts, I think it's for sure going to 8 teams. Because, I mean, that's going to start to hurt ratings and stuff. And people are going to be like, why would I watch the semifinal if both games are going to be blowouts? So I feel like this game, you know, I feel like it's going to be close, which saves college football. But right now, I do think Clemson wins. And obviously, I got Alabama as well, which would set up, I mean, to me, a great game. And Ryan, you also got Alabama, Clemson?
Yeah, I have Alabama, Clemson. I just want to talk about one more thing regarding this game that I think is really interesting, and that's Dabo Swinney's comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, a lot of press and news was made when his rankings came out, and he had Ohio State ranked 11th. No one in their right mind would say Ohio State is the 11th best team in the country. And so this is Dabo maybe poking the bear a little bit because he's saying that he doesn't believe in them. He's saying that, you know, I only had teams that played 9+ games in the top 10 and Ohio State played 6. Ohio State only played 6. He let that be very known throughout the week that Ohio State only played 6 games. So, you know, the question is, will this be a little, you know, you're drawing up some motivation, some bulletin board material for Ohio State? Right now, I'm going to say no, because I think Clemson will come out ready to prove something after last year's loss in the championship. And obviously, Dabo Swinney's the guy who's going to get the players to play hard. But I think it is really interesting to see him, this could backfire, right? If you lose this game, it's going to be the talk of the offseason. You get Ohio State ranked 11 and they came in and beat you in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, that's something that you can't have happen. I don't think it will happen. But going back to these picks, yes, I do have Bama. I do have Clemson. I have both teams covering their spreads. So I have Bama by 24. I have Clemson by a 9. I think the Sugar Bowl will be interesting, but I think in the end, Clemson will pull away. Maybe it's close for 3 quarters, back and forth. But I think overall, Clemson will figure them out more than Ohio State will be able to answer. And so I have as my national championship.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, you talk about a really good point with the chip on their shoulder. Because of Ohio State, I mean, Justin Fields is going to have a chip on his shoulder because he has to have a good game. And then Dabo Swinney's just giving them a chip on their shoulder because ranking them 11th. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I do think that Clemson wins. We both think that. But it should definitely be interesting. And it should set up, if both these teams, Alabama, Clemson, that sets up just a world-class final where, you got Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, you got that 2 great offenses. Should definitely be really fun. But next, we're going to shift over to the Diamond, talk some MLB hot stove. Padres made some big moves, in the pitching staff. Now, are they going to be the best pitching staff in baseball? We'll get into all of that. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You're listening to One on One Nightly. Back in One on One Nightly. I'm Andrew Bellotta alongside Ryan Gregoire. Also, Nick Fada joins us here as we're going to get into the MLB hot stove as we finally have a spark here as the Padres made 2 huge splashes as they acquired Blake Snell, former Cy Young winner, and 4-time All-Star Yu Darvish. And this just gives them, to me, a hell of a rotation. My brother's a huge Padres fan, so I just want to shout out Nick because he's been a fan since, for forever, and they've never been good. So now hopefully they finally get a shot here to be a contender with, obviously they're going to be battling with the Dodgers, and that rotation is just straight filth. You have Dilson Lamet, who was great last year. You have Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, also a few younger guys, Mackenzie Gore, really big prospect. Chris Paddock, I know that no one had a bad year this year, but he was really good in 2019. And then that offense is just so good. So do you guys feel like they're going to challenge the Dodgers in this one? I think that's the biggest thing because I think that they're a year away just because Clevenger was out. If they had Clevenger, I think they would be right there with them. But without Clevenger this year, he had Tommy John surgery, I believe. So he's going to be out for next season. So I think they're just a year away. And that
huge contracts and through the hitting, and that did not work. So to see the Padres take a more, smart approach with, you were an upstart team last year. No one really thought you were serious contenders, but you made some noise, and now you're going to go for it. You have a window, and you're really trying to capitalize. And Blake Snell's a guy who's under contract for a few more years. Yu Darvish too. You're taking advantage of these teams who are trying to cut budget, during the pandemic and all sorts of other reasons. And you're taking their, Blake Snell's a Cy Young Award winner. Yu Darvish was a runner-up last year. And the hitting was there last year. And the reason that last year I wasn't so big on the Padres was the pitching. These are big-time moves. Obviously, as you said, Mike Clevenger's out for the year. But Blake Snell's a guy who we just saw what he could do in the World Series. The last time we watched a baseball game, it was Blake Snell pitching 5 shutout innings. Getting taken out early, that's a whole nother discussion. But he's a big game pitcher. Yu Darvish just started World Series games as well. And to get some vets like that on a young team like this, I think it's a great move. Now, it's unfair, I think, to still say they're going to beat the Dodgers and dethrone them. And I think it's unfair from the Padres perspective, too, because that's not necessarily how you have to look at everything. That's the depressing way to look at it. Oh, we're better than the Dodgers? Probably never will be, just how stacked they are. But I love how they're able to get the pitchers and really go for it. This is the perfect opportunity for them. With teams cutting payroll, they're adding it. They're getting the rotation short up. And I just love these moves overall because one more thing, you have mentioned Mackenzie Gore. He's their top pitching prospect, one of the top in baseball. They're able to keep him as well as 6 of their 7 top prospects. Yeah. So to get guys like this without giving up the prospect capital was huge.
Yeah, I think what we've learned as fans especially is you need pitching if you want to win. It's a very simple formula. The Rays were a perfect example of that. Their pitching staff was the best, if not one of the best, rotations, bullpens in the league. There was no question about that, and it paid off. Of course, they didn't come out with the ultimate title, but I mean, you got to be happy with the World Series appearance at least if you're them. And one thing that's really just amazing to me is that these 2 moves were made, I think it was in a 3-day time span. Maybe it was 2 days.
Less.
So it might be a little.
It was a day.
Maybe even a day. Yeah. So prove my point even more. The Padres are ready, man. They are hungry, and they want to go get it. I think they could rival them. Dethrone them could be a stretch, but to be able to kind of get there, they're in the same division. They're going to be playing a lot. So it's just going to be a good, it's going to be good baseball to watch. And these pitchers duels, I know some people think they're boring, but at the same time, it's great to watch some aces go to work. And both teams got several great pitchers to go out and do their thing every night.
Yeah, I mean, those 2 trades, I feel like obviously, Ryan, you were talking about how, COVID and the pandemic really hurt, teams and salaries, big thing. The one thing I do want to say, Blake Snell, he's only on the books the next 3 years, $13 million. I just want to add this quickly. And the Rays said that that was their kind of big player to let go and to give them cap space or salary space. That's just, and their payroll is like $60 million. So that's just a problem to me in baseball. And the Rays are a great team, and it's really nothing against the Rays. But when you have, to me, a pitcher right now that's on a very, very team-friendly deal in Blake Snell, and that's the guy you move because of salary, I just think that's hilarious when you have teams like the Padres going out and spending, and hats to them because they're taking advantage of teams that, want to either kind of let go of guys because of the pandemic and stuff like that, maybe rebuild a little more, and they're able to get 2 really good starters. And Blake Snell, I think, is the big guy. He's the ace, and I think he becomes the ace of that staff. So, I think that's something that is just really important for them. And it just stinks for them that they're going to have to play a lot of wild card games because, but having that pitching in those games, Nick, you were talking about, pitcher duels and those wild card games, it's always great pitching duels, but I feel like right now the Padres are set up really nicely. And then no one even talked about their offense over the last few days. You got Tatis, Machado, Hosmer. And when you go to the playoffs, you need those professional hitters, and they have a ton of them. So honestly, I'm looking out for these Padres and can't wait to watch them, as they should be a really good story in baseball. But now I do want to move over to our local teams here, Mets, Yankees here on this hot stove. It's been pretty cold for both of these teams. And obviously the Mets with Steve Cohen, we're waiting for these free agents because they've been saying it all along. They're not trading. They're not going to probably trade because the old regime and what Brody Van Wagenen did, he just screwed them. So now they only can get free agents. And I think I want to start it off here with the Mets and talk about how this affects Trevor Bauer's market with the Mets, because the Padres were in on him. Now they're not. Now that's one more team that's off Bauer's list. He just came out that he wants a huge deal, over 30 million AAV. He wants over 200 million. And I don't know if he's going to get that, especially because we don't know how many teams are available. But how do you guys think this affects Bauer's market? And does this now seem like the Mets going to get Bauer? What's kind of what are you guys thinking about it?
I mean, it definitely hurts his market because this is one less team that is agent go and say, oh, look, the Padres are competing for him. You're going to there because it's one less team to compete. It's going to take less money to get it done. And so Trevor Bauer is a guy who, we can talk about. He just won the Cy Young. He's had a few up and down years, but he is a real top of the line guy. Is he worth the Garrett Cole money? No, I don't know, just because of the consistency hasn't really been there. But Trevor Bauer to the Mets would be a fascinating move. Obviously, you have Stroman on the one-year deal, the qualifying offer. Syndergaard just had Tommy John. So you do need rotation help. You remember Brody was saying how they had the deepest rotation in baseball going into the year, and you had Rick Porcello and Michael Wacha starting half their games. So, if you're able to pair Trevor Bauer, Jacob deGrom, you do it if you're the Mets, and then this, one less team for them to compete with. So it's looking better and better for their chances to get a guy like Bauer.
For me, it's interesting because I look at the Mets as a team who, they've had very, what's the right word I'm looking for? Their expectations have been all over the place. You expect them to be good and they're or you expect them to be and they're great. It's hard to kind of figure out where this direction of this team is going. For me personally, I see Bauer as kind of too much of a character, I think, if that makes sense, to go to the Mets. I think they kind of need stuff that's very, from a personality standpoint. His talent is no doubt there. Obviously, if he goes there, it's a great move. But at the same time, I think it could be, I guess I'm talking negative because the Mets have had a lot of negative things happen to them over the past few years. I could see Bauer almost, I don't know what the right description is for it, but I could see some sort of harm coming that way. Maybe
demand too much attention.
Straight out of there early, or maybe, I don't know. I don't love the move to go to New York for him. Maybe to the Yankees, but I don't think that's happening either. But at the same time, like you said, Ryan, his talent is clearly there, even though he has been a little up and down. He's a pitcher who is just great, and any team would want him. It's very simple. So, of course, if you can get him, go get him. There's still a little bit of time to see where that's going to go, but I think both New York teams could throw their names in the market and see what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, for Bauer, I think when you're looking at the Mets specifically, I feel like they're a team that, they're obviously only going to spend in free agency. And I think a lot of people kind of have them getting George Springer, and it's really between them and the Blue Jays. And I feel like the Mets will pull that out and get George Springer. And then it kind of goes into, would you rather have Bauer, or would you rather have kind of a few other little pieces, maybe, a guy like Jake Odorizzi and Liam Hendricks, kind of pair them together and kind of build some depth? Or do you go out and get that star player in Bauer? And I get that player with Bauer here. And why? Because he's a guy that you said that he's kind of an odd guy. He kind of demands a lot of attention, the whole thing with YouTube. And I understand that. And maybe in New York that doesn't work. But I want my star pitchers to have that mentality that I want the ball and I want to be able to let's do this. And I feel like the Mets, and my favorite, maybe this is biased because my favorite Mets teams had those great starting pitchers, and you had Matt Harvey trying to go back out to the ninth inning. But for starting pitchers, I want dogs. And I feel like Bauer, he's a guy that's going to give me 7 innings. And I think that, especially in baseball, 5 innings is like the new norm, and 5 and out, then I'll go to the showers. I don't like guys like that. I like guys that are going to go 7 innings, especially with the Mets bullpen, which is not that good. Maybe it gets better this year, but they've had their struggles. You bring Bauer into that team, and you got DeGrom and Bauer at the top of your rotation. You got Stroman, and then you have Syndergaard coming back. Maybe you add another kind of lower tier starter. And then again, I feel like you have a pretty solid rotation, probably not the deepest one in the league, like Brody said, as you were saying, Ryan, because that comment was just crazy. But I think those type of comments are now past for the Mets, their history. I would really like them to get the stars here in this free agency. Give me Springer, give me Bauer. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I just have to talk about the character thing you said too. It does not matter. Like, I think it's really overblown with Bauer because teammates like him. He's not a
Yeah.
guy that it's like the diva who, yes, he commands attention, but that's because people give it to him, right? He's an
Yeah.
electric personality. I think he's good for baseball because he's bringing
Growing the
attention
game.
to the sport. In a sport where the slogan grow the game, let the kids play." That's not how the game is marketed. And Trevor Bauer is a guy that people who are just casual baseball fans know because he's outspoken. And on top of that, he is a great pitcher. And to the character things, yeah, you don't see people talk bad about Trevor Bauer. So I think that is something that's always been overblown. I think it's unfair. I think it's just because he's not the traditional guy. Maybe the media wants to knock him a peg down a little bit. We see him going back and forth with media guys all the time, but he's good for baseball. And as you said, Andrew, he's a dog. He's a guy I want with my season on the line pitching. He's going to give you 7 innings. He's going to fight. He's going to earn every out. And that's something you need on a playoff team. That's something he can give you. He started World Series games. He's been in big games. So he is somebody that I think, if the deal's right, maybe this is where you can get him for less than normal because of the market right now with the pandemic. But yeah, I would have no issue. I would look past the character stuff all day because at the end of the day, Trevor Bauer is going to help your baseball team win, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And that's why I want him, on the Mets. And I do want to flip it over to the Bronx real quick. As, both of you guys are Yankees fans. Nick, you got the Yankee shirt on right now. And I feel like this Yankees offseason is pretty puzzling in my mind because I feel like the Yankees are always the team. We're going to go spend quickly. And they're waiting and out. And they waited again, probably too long to get Tommy Kahnle. He just left. I know he's going to be out next year, but that's something for Yankee fans. He was a great pitcher, very productive, very quickly. Definitely, as Yankee fans, I think this is kind of new. We're waiting for DJ LeMahieu. I feel like that he's going to be the big domino for the Yankees, and after that, everything follows suit. But when was the last time the Yankees saw a guy they love and arguably they need to win a World Series, and they're waiting to get him? I just think that's really interesting.
Arguably isn't even a question.
Yeah.
I don't know why, how. Every single question is running through my mind as to why LeMahieu is not re-signed yet. That guy has put up 2 back-to-back MVP campaigns, or caliber campaigns, excuse me, where he easily could have won in both seasons, and this shortened one, of course. He even missed time in the shortened season and still was there. He's a batting champ, plays great defense, always comes up when you need a guy to get a hit or make a play. I think personally he's the best player on the Yankees because he's not all about what the traditional, the Yankees have done in the past, really in their history, where it's long balls, win it. You got to hit the homer. He'll get you some home runs, but he's a guy who's going to be consistent and bring about, again, his batting average is the highest on the team by far and one of the highest in the league. So he's a batting champ. Duh. But you need that sort of, I think I would like to see the Yankees remold and reshape what they have. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not saying they can't win with this team, but it's almost like what you guys talked about earlier with the Saints, where they always have this super high expectations because they've got this star-studded team, and then they go and blow it when it really matters. So for me, it's really LeMahieu has to be the priority. I don't know why he hasn't been signed, but I think, like you said, it's the dominoes are going to fall when/if they re-sign him. But if they don't, I have no confidence in this team this season.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is if you told me at any point in the Yankees history, right, they're always the spending team, that it's December 30th, and the biggest move of the Yankees offseason was Blake Snell getting traded out of the division, right? It's nothing they did. That's the biggest thing that's impacted this team. And that's just insane to think about from the Yankees because we always expect them to spend. And when there's a guy that they want and they need, they always pony up the money. That's why I'm ready to pump the brakes. I'm still pumping the brakes on DJ going somewhere else. I think right now it's just negotiations, right? You have to give praise to him. He wants the most money he can. The Yankees, they want to save money. Right now there's like a $25 million gap. DJ is really still just talking to the Yankees. It's not like he's out there with offers from the Mets and all these other teams. And when that comes, I believe that the Yankees will pony up the money. They will match any offer that he gets, and he will accept that offer because he wants to stay with the Yankees. There's a reason he hasn't really talked to other teams. There's a reason that he's been so focused with the Yankees in discussions rather than around the league. He wants to stay here. They want him back. It's just, I think, money right now. It's a cat and mouse game. The Yankees trying to save a few bucks. He's trying to get a fifth year. But at the end of the day, if he does sign somewhere else, then I'm ready to blow up. Then I'm ready to flip out. But right now, I still really believe he'll be back. So the panic button hasn't been pressed just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they will probably end up getting him, but I mean, if he's willing to listen to other teams, I think other teams, if we'll see how actually the Yankees, if they will go as far as matching other teams, I think they will end up doing, but we'll see how much this pandemic has really affected him. And the one quick point that I want to bring up, Nick, you were talking about how you would want to see a switch from kind of all the home runs and, all that type of stuff. And I feel like with the Yankees, that's to me the biggest problem with this team. And they need DJ because he's the guy that's the clutch hitter.
Yep.
And if you don't have that clutch hitter, you're not winning in the postseason. They probably need more of DJ than less than. And again, if Stanton's not healthy, you have Judge obviously there, but again, he's a guy that we've seen go on huge hot streaks and then falls. And I feel like right now, I mean, when you go to the playoffs, there are a lot of guys that, especially young guys like Judge. I mean, I remember Yoenis Cespedes was the biggest guy, great against bad pitchers. When you put him up in the big scenarios, it's just strikeouts, and the Yankees are boomer bust. And again, we'll see. I think they do need DJ though. So it will definitely be very interesting to see how that all pans out for the Yankees and also the Mets in this free agency hot stove in baseball. So we're going to finish off our show talking about the NBA and what the local teams here in New York are up to in this early start of the season. But we are going to take a short break here. We'll be right back with you with more One-on-One Nightly. We're back here on One-on-One Nightly. I'm Andrew Galata alongside Ryan Gregware, Nick Feta, and we're going to get to the hardwood here talking about the Knicks and Nets. And we're going to start off here with the Knicks coming in 2-2, which is pretty, surprising. Obviously very, very early in the season, but a lot of people did not expect this Knicks team to be good. And the way they're winning is also different. Julius Randle looks really, really good early in this season. And again, it's just interesting because I thought coming into this season that the Knicks would probably play well. I thought that maybe they would actually challenge for that last seed. I think they ultimately won't get there and fall short. But, as a Knicks fan, I remember, three out of the last 5 years, the Knicks have started pretty well. They go in 17-14 or like 17-14, and then they just have these massive losing streaks. And I do think that this year is different, as I don't think they're going to completely tank. but I think they're going to hover probably around, the 30 wins, and, maybe they get a little bit more. But I do think that this team is different. I think they're built a little different. I like that they now have a pretty solid head coach with Tom Thibodeau. And I feel like, I don't trust them to kind of ever win a championship, because I just think James Dolan has kind of ruined a lot of things in this franchise. And I feel like when it comes down to the end of the day, he'll do something to mess it up. I mean, even recently with Porzingis, who would the Knicks get back in that trade? I mean, that was just, to me, I always go back to that one, but they're kind of growing, and I think they're kind of making their way to be a relevant basketball team, which, as a Knicks fan, and look, I feel like everyone in New York, obviously you have some Nets fans, but I feel like a lot of, most of New York's Knicks fans. And when the Knicks are good, New York is electric. It's a basketball town. And I feel like right now, this is the first step.
When you have zero expectations, that's when you get pleasantly surprised. If you have any expectations for the Knicks, your heart is going to get broken 10 out of 10 times.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You think you're getting KD, Kyrie, Zion, you're getting Julius Randle, who actually, funny thing is, been really good this year. So just going off, they're 2-2. This is the longest they've been 500 in this season in 4 years, which is just absurd. It's just absurd that we haven't seen a 2-2 start in forever. And just going off the Knicks now, no one's expecting a championship this year. I'm still not expecting the playoffs. I think it's still unfair to assume, but they have a direction, and that's what's good under Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau, who still, we don't know what we're going to get. Obviously, it's been only 4 games. I don't want to overreact, but the way they're playing basketball is different, and it's actually the style of the NBA, right? Through 4 games, they're leading the league in three-point percentage, and the team that's doing that at the end of the year is usually deep into the playoffs. And as you talked about, they're actually playing defense. This is the first time in forever I feel like the defense is a strong suit. Obviously, it's only 4 games. They did just beat the 3-0 Cavs, though, held them to 86 while having 20-plus turnovers. So it is fascinating to see, a direction with the Knicks. Will they be there at the end of the day? No. Will they ever be there with James Dolan at the end of the day? As you said, it's really hard to say. But I'm just glad that, honestly, they look competitive. Even in the losses, maybe not the Philly one as much, but the Pacers lost, they're up at halftime. They're in these games, more than we're used to seeing. And it's just when you have no expectations, like everyone should with the Knicks, you get surprised just a little bit. It's awesome to see, after 4 games, NBA Twitter's blowing up with Knicks fans. This fan base is so strong, they will come after you. As you said, New York is a basketball town at the end of the day. And if this team does ever get actually good, then it's going to be scary.
Yeah, absolutely. What gets me most excited is the fact that you can watch them play, and it actually is not just so sloppy. It's actually some pretty solid basketball. Some guys look like they can really play. I mean, Randall and Elfrid Payton, who would have thought would have started the season like this? RJ Barrett has slowed down a little bit in these last 2 games, but the first 2 games he was phenomenal. I mean, being able to see quality basketball, and especially in these past 2 games for a full 60 minutes of play, or 48 minutes of play, is great. I mean, I haven't watched a Knicks game in its entirety and been happy. I cannot name the year, frankly, when that's happened. They play these games and they play hard, and I credit Tom Thibodeau for that, of course. And it just looks like there's life, and it's such a good thing for, like I said about the Giants, it's such a good thing for the culture. And when you have no expectations, like you said, Ryan, it's just so exciting when the wins come, because if they lose, it's like, oh well. I wasn't expecting a win against the Pacers or the Sixers, and frankly, or the Bucks. But that Cleveland game, I was like, let's go. Let's get these guys. They're 3-0, and they're not that good. Come on. So it's just great to see the Knicks actually be able to play competitively, and it's just with exciting play. These guys are hitting shots. They're playing defense, and it's just life, energy, and that's exactly what you need out of an extremely young team as well.
Yeah, Nick, what you were saying, the last time you were happy with the Knicks game, probably was when they were losing to try to tank for Zion. That was probably the last time you were happy with a game, because I feel like, right now, I think a lot of, you just see sound basketball. That's all Tom Thibodeau. And he's a coach that's going to solidify things. And as I've been saying, I think he's a guy that he's going to come up in here, and maybe he doesn't have the highest ceiling as a head coach. Like, maybe they're not going to win a championship, but at least you're seeing good NBA basketball, and it's like passable for the fans. And I think that's a step in the right direction. And, I was kind of thinking about like maybe this is the, Mark Jackson of the Warriors. And maybe that's too much. And it probably is. But to try to just get them on the right path to at least try to have some success. And I think as we've seen with the Nets, there is a path to get stars. And it's just by building the correct culture, because once free agents see that you could win and you have the right culture, then it's like, okay, I'll play with you. And I don't think that, and then the big plus is you're playing an MSG. Like, who doesn't want to do that? Plus a really, good foundation. That's, I think, the most exciting thing about this Knicks team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Julius Randle, he's not going to average 25, 11, and shoot 70% from three all year. But it's just really encouraging to see his play turn around individually, just because last year it was such a thing with him. You had Steve Mills go out and just basically apologize for signing him. That's how bad it got. And if he could turn into an asset for this team and they could get something for him, or he could even just play out the rest of this contract without looking like a disaster, it's just a step in the right direction. As you just said, you want a culture. The Nets had a winning culture that probably was the reason KD and Kyrie chose them over the Knicks. They'd seen them compete. They'd seen them in the playoffs in a way that the Knicks have just been embarrassing. And so to see, is this a winning team yet? No, but just to see guys play hard, to see Tom Thibodeau go like, it's just a game, it's one step. This is a long season. I like stuff like that. I don't like him freaking out after these wins. Beating the Bucks by 20 is, if you told me that like before the season, I'd say, what planet? Like, is there an alternate universe? And so, yeah, just, the thing with the Knicks is it's a good start. It's early in the year, but just playing competitive basketball is refreshing because, as Nick said, I've never been able to enjoy myself watching 4 quarters of this team. Literally never. So to see this, it's encouraging for sure.
Yeah, and then, you guys were just talking about the Nets, so we'll switch it over to the Nets here very, very quickly before we wrap up the show. And they just got the win tonight to move to 3-2, 145 to 141 against the Hawks. And I feel like right now with this Nets team right now, I feel like it's a lot of KD and Kyrie, and I feel like right now they want to get those guys to play. And even in this game, you had Kevin Durant, 33 points, and he was a guy that was 11 for 22 field goal percentage, and he looked good. You had Kyrie, 25 points. Joe Harris had 23 points in this one. But I think the big thing with the Nets, especially after that injury with Spencer Dinwiddie, who partially torn his ACL, he'll be out for a little bit, or more than a little bit. He'll be out for a while, maybe the whole season. We'll have to see. But I feel like right now what this Nets team is trying to do is kind of build the chemistry between their two stars, and then they're going to try to have everything fall into place. I think that a lot of people were kind of downplaying this Nets team, which is kind of funny. I mean, they're a New York team. They just got 2 of the best players in all of the NBA, and we didn't hear that much about them, which I think is pretty interesting. And I think they're going to be right there as a 2 to 3 seed. And I think they're just starting to build it. And, I know they're 3-2, and, before they got the win, they had the same record as the Knicks, but I feel like they're a team that's going to build kind of just step by step. Let's get our stars playing together. Because I think that's the big thing when you talk about, the big threes and stuff like that. It's always about getting the stars to mesh together. And I think that's what they're trying to do early. And I think it's worked out.
Yeah, the Nets are playing exactly how they should be playing. 2 losses, whatever. They sat out one of those games. Yeah. Other one, you lose games in the NBA. It's really not a big deal. But KD and Kyrie look good. That's the other thing. KD's coming off major Achilles surgery. He's 31 years old. Like, there was a question mark, is he going to come back? And that's probably part of the reason, as you said, people were kind of sleeping on this team. They are right up there with the Bucks, in my opinion, with the star power of KD and Kyrie. They look good early on. Obviously, as we've seen with Kyrie, things can unravel, but they're doing exactly what they should be doing. The Dinwiddie loss does hurt because getting buckets when you have KD and Kyrie sitting are big. But Karis LeVert, he can still get buckets, and they're just going to rely on him a little more. I don't think the Dinwiddie loss will cripple their season or anything like that. But the Nets are exactly who we thought they'd be, as in a contender for the NBA championship. Nothing less. They look good so far. They look really good opening night against the Warriors. They look great against the Celtics. And they just have to get through the season, stay healthy and get KD into, perfect game shape. And then they're a scary team.
Yeah, the health part for me is exactly, I think it's the biggest emphasis for this Nets team. You lose Dinwiddie this early, that is a big blow. It won't kill them, but that guy is one of the better players on their team for sure. But what we have seen for sure is once you get to the playoffs, It's about guys just showing out. And there are arguably no players that do that better in the league than Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Um, they proved it through the past, how many years? 6 years and 5 years in the finals with between Cleveland and Golden State, all those battles. So it's very clear that come playoff time, those guys will be ready to do what they do best. To rival, Milwaukee, I'm not that hot on them this season. But again, of course, it is still really early. But they are definitely a top tier team in the league, let alone the East. And they could fight for that finals. I would say it would be a stretch for them to win because I think the Lakers is everyone's favorite. But it'll just definitely be exciting to see, A, a team from New York be able to go out there and do this and get deep into the playoffs, hopefully. And B, just Kevin Durant back, personally. I love that guy as a talent. And Kyrie, if he can stay healthy as well, those two playing a full season and playoffs together, it's just spectacular basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave you guys with this. I mean, I feel like the Nets right now, they have the star power. To me, the only team in the Eastern Conference that has the star power to beat LeBron and the Lakers. So if they get there, I think it will be very fun. But it's 10:30 now. The clock has struck 10:30. So that means, with all that said, it is time to wrap up the show. We covered a lot here, a ton of sports. I mean, I feel like we almost covered all the major sports, and I just had a great time. So for our producer, Alex Wolves, for keeping the lights on here tonight, my partners, Ryan Gregoire and Nick Feda, have a great rest of your night. One on One Nightly is a production of WFUV Sports.